It's a Mailbag Monday here on Locked on Blue Jackets, talking about the salary cap. We're talking about off-season moves, talking about prospects, talking about all kinds of things on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's been a minute since I've done a mailbag episode, so I figured why not answer some questions. It is Monday, Mailbag Monday, after all. I'm just gonna get right into it because I got a couple of really good ones on Twitter. I got a couple of more fun ones via email. Let's say a couple of sillier questions, maybe. So I'm gonna start off with the serious Twitter questions, and then we'll move on. But first off, Ed Helinski wants to know what letter grade would I give CBJ management for their off-season efforts and why. This was a tough one, right? Because I don't think this was the best possible offseason they could have had. I think, and we'll talk kind of in a little bit more detail about why that is in a second here. But like, the problem I have with the Blue Jackets offseason is that I think they improved a little bit, but not as much as they needed to. And the teams that are kind of kept pace with them in the standings, right? Like Montreal is the big example. Montreal, I think, got a lot better this offseason. The Blue Jackets did not get as much of an improvement as Montreal did, right? So like, did they get better? Sure. At worst, they just kind of stayed where they were. But the problem with staying where they were is I think that there are teams around them that are, looking to get better, hoping to get better. And that's kind of a problem, like you got to think that the Rangers are looking for a bounce back season. I don't know what's going to happen with the Islanders. Like it really could go either way. Penguins, I think, are going to be pretty bad this year. I think the Capitals probably take a step back. The Devils, depends on whether Jack Hughes is healthy this season or not, right? Flyers are another team. I think they want to get better. They're kind of in a similar-ish boat as the Blue Jackets, right? Where I don't think that they improved as much as they wanted to. Bringing Travis Zegras in was great. I don't think they improved their goaltending as much as they wanted to. Familiar, right? So this is all to kind of say, I don't think that they did a bad job this offseason, right? A couple of moves aside, which again we'll get into in a minute here. But I don't think that they improved as much as they needed to kind of, again, keep pace with the teams that were around them and potentially take that next step to being a playoff team. Now, that being said, a lot of the moving parts for them becoming a playoff team is players that they already have getting better, right? If Zach Werenski can play the level that he did last year, we're fine. If Kromachenko can take another step forward, great. If Fantilli, Johnson, the young players continue to take steps forward, right? It's not addition by subtraction. There's a phrase for it that I can't think of, but like their young guys are going to keep getting better, hopefully. And that's what's going to push them forward, right? It's not going to be the moves they made this summer or last summer or next summer or whatever. Like for me, it's continuing to develop the young players that you already have, right? You didn't get Noah Dobson. Fine. You didn't get Keandre Miller. Fine. You didn't get Nikolai Ehlers, Brock Besser, Mitch Marner. Fine. Whatever. Stick with the players that you did have, right? And so all of this to say, like, some moves I didn't like. I think the Provorov move is very clearly a move that I didn't like, that I think a lot of people didn't like. I understand why they did it, but that doesn't make it a good move, right? For me, that's a D. But on the other hand, I really like the stuff that they did at the draft. I think that they get, a solid A minus at the draft. I really like the late round value that they got. I like their first round picks. And then you've got kind of the in-betweeny moves, right? Like you've got the Charlie Coyle trade. I think that they gave up too much to get Charlie Coyle, especially when you consider that they took Miles Wood in that trade as well, who my guess is not going to get a lot of ice time this season. You give up 2 picks and Gavin Brindley, who is one of the prospects that I liked a lot more. Like, I like acquiring Charlie Coyle. I don't know if I like it at the price, at the cost, right? But I would give that, a C plus, B minus type of a grade, right? Other moves like the Tarasov move was fine. I loved the Fabro extension. I liked the Voronkov extension. Obviously, we're still waiting on a couple of extensions. Nothing like major. I think the only other RFA extensions that we're waiting on right now is Damon Hunt and Mikhail Pucha, right? So the big moves are already done. I would probably give them a B minus overall. I think the draft is doing a lot of heavy lifting, but I also think the Fabro, like I said, the Fabro move was great. I liked the draft. Like you moved on from Tarasov. You cut a lot of the older kind of replacement level veterans. Brought in some younger guys, not that much younger. Like the Blue Jackets were a lot older than I thought they were last year, right? Obviously, I don't like that they let go of James Van Riemsdyk, but he was a much older piece, right? But they've brought in Isaac Lundestrom, who's only 25, like Miles Wood he's only 29. Charlie Coyle is like the oldest player on the team now, I think, and he's 33 years old, right? So this is hopefully going to be a younger roster than last season, but a much more experienced roster, right? I don't foresee them adding any more like young players necessarily. And by young, I mean, like under 22, 23. Like I could see Luka Dalbeau making a push, but beyond that, right? Like the team is younger and I think the team is better for it. Moving on from Danforth, moving on from Kuraly, LeBanc, Luke Cunnin, like all of these players moving on, I think is a net positive. So, like to round it all up, I think I do think I stand by my like B minus grading. There are some moves that I liked a lot. There are some moves that I really didn't like. And like it grades out as an average, right? Like a B minus is fine. The problem is, I think, again, like teams that were around them in the standings last season had better off seasons, right? I'm just pulling up what the standings were at the end of the season so I can confirm what's going on there. But like, okay, the Canadians, I think, had a really good offseason, annoyingly. They were 2 points ahead of the Blue Jackets. The Devils didn't do a ton, but I expect them to kind of, again, Jack Hughes is their addition, right? If they can get Jack Hughes back and keep him healthy, then that's great news for them, and they should be a much better team with Jack Hughes, right? Below the Blue Jackets in the standings, we're looking at the Red Wings, the Rangers, the Islanders, all within 7 points of the Blue Jackets. Pittsburgh, I think, is going to get worse. Buffalo, I think, will stay about where they are. But like the Islanders could go either way. My guess is they'll probably be about the same team as they were last season. But it's the Islanders are the team that I always have trouble predicting, right? Because it really does feel like they are an Ilya Sorokin injury away from being a lottery team. The Rangers want to have a bounce back. They had a real up and down season. We'll see what happens with them. Obviously, a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces gone, new coach, etc. The Red Wings are another team that I think didn't improve as much as they wanted to. Obviously, they hopefully got the goalie that they were hoping for in John Gibson that will lift them back into being a playoff team. But I don't know if they improved more than the Blue Jackets did. Like maybe. The main concern for me is that the teams ahead of the Blue Jackets got better, right? Like the Canadiens is the specific one that I'm thinking of. The Devils adding Hughes is going to be big for them, but in theory, the Blue Jackets should be one of the top 4 teams in the Metro, right? It should be Washington, Carolina, New Jersey, and Columbus should be the 4 best teams in the Metro. Can the Blue Jackets make that jump to a wild card spot, or can they sneak their way? They were 2 points away from the 3rd seed in the Metro, right? Like that's people forgot that. I'd forgotten that. Like the Blue Jackets, yeah, they were 2 points out of a playoff spot. The Canadiens got that final spot at 91 points. But New Jersey Devils were the 3rd seed in the Metro, and they had 91 points as well. Now, they had 2 more wins than the Blue Jackets, and so there would have had to have been some shenanigans there in terms of, like, regulation, overtime, etc., etc. Like, their regulation wins was way ahead of the Blue Jackets, and so was their regulation or overtime. Blue Jackets won a lot of shootout games. Or they won more shootout games than the average team, because they went to shootouts more often, I think. But the point I'm making here is I'm going to give them a B minus, not because it was bad, but just because I think other teams did more to jump them. And you know what? Maybe in 4 months' time or however many months' time, we're sitting here and I'm like, wow, I was really wrong. The team did exactly what they needed. But as of right now, I find myself a little underwhelmed by some of the moves that they made, or some of the moves that they didn't make, let's say, right? So we'll see how it goes. But as of right now, I think a B minus is more than fair, quite frankly. Gonna take a quick break, and then I've got another question that I want to answer. And this one's about the salary cap rising and how difficult that is going to make life for a team like the Blue Jackets. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And it's more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I love Monarch Money. I think it makes things a lot easier. It's really streamlined the process. Like it used to be, I would open my banking app and then my budgeting app and then a spreadsheet, and then I would just kind of give up and hope that I had enough money to make it to the end of the month, or, I would just kind of throw money in my savings and hope for the best. But Monarch is giving me a much smarter way to budget and save and all of that good stuff. So do what I did and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're doing a mailbag today. I just spent way longer than I thought I was going to talking about the off-season move grade as a whole, but we're moving on. I've got a question about the salary cap struggles from Clint Beastwood, which is a great display name. Will NHL trades and signings become less available with the cap rising? Seems like a lot of good teams will just be able to re-sign their players. This concerns me, as I think this will just keep the Jackets where they are currently. Yes and no is kind of my answer to this. And by that, I mean, yes, I think you're going to see less movement. I think you're going to see less cap strap teams. And it's not lost on, like, the irony is not lost on me that the first time in a long time that the Blue Jackets are like, wow, look at all the cap space that we've got to weaponize. Every other team in the league also, like, if this cap space had been if the cap was going up next off season, right, and the Blue Jackets were in the last year this season of that kind of flat cap, or cap just going up a little bit, I think that they would have been in a much better place. Unfortunately, their biggest asset was something that basically everyone else had, right? And in fairness, there are still a handful of teams that are over the salary cap right now. So the Golden Knights, the Canadiens, and the Panthers are all over right now. The Knights and the Canadiens, it sounds like it's gonna be Alex Pietrangelo for the Knights is going to be going on long-term IR. The Canadians obviously have Carey Price's contract to put on long-term IR, so that'll fix that. And for the Panthers, it sounds like Matthew Tkachuk's going to start the season on long-term IR. So they'll be in a fine place. They'll have a decision to make probably in December when he comes back. But until then, they're doing fine. So yes, the cap going up means that trades will be less likely because you will get less teams that want to try and shed cap, which is frustrating. However, the cap rising is also kind of it's a good thing for teams that are kind of, in theory, at the end-ish of their rebuild. I don't think the Blue Jackets are quite at the end of their rebuild. I think they are getting there. We'll see how this season goes before we officially declare the rebuild over, right? But the Blue Jackets are in a position right now where, in theory, they don't have a lot of adding to do of like outside contracts, right? What they do have to do is sign players like Adam Fantilli. They have to give players like Cole Sillinger a raise, players like Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, Denton Matejchuk's coming off his ELC, right? Like in the next couple of years, the Blue Jackets are going to spend a lot of cap space on their homegrown players. And that's what's going to get really interesting about it, right? Is that by the end of the 26-27 season, the only players that they have under contract are Sean Monahan, Mathieu Olivier, Miles Wood, Ivan Provorov, Damon Severson, Dante Fabro, and 1 year of Zach Werenski, right? But like Eric Branson's off the books, Elvis Merzlikins is off the books, Charlie Coyle off the books, Boone Jenner is done. Like he'll probably be back, but like Charlie Coyle off the books. All of these players are going to be off the books, and that's going to create more cap space. The Blue Jackets right now still have $15 million in cap space to play with, right? It's not as much as I thought, but they still have there's still only 3 teams have more cap space than them. So if it gets to a point where, let's say, again, the Dallas Stars have $1 million in cap space, the Oilers, the Flyers, the Blues, the Rangers all have under $1 million in cap space right now, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility that these teams are going to be in a position to come to the Blue Jackets and say, hey, we would like some of that cap space. We will give you assets for it, right? So, yes, I think it will make trades harder. I think it will make free agency a lot harder. But I do think that the Blue Jackets are still in a pretty solid place right now. They don't yet have to worry, man, where are we going to get the money to sign Adam Fantilli, right? Where are we going to get the money to sign Ken Johnson? Where are we going to get the money to sign Kirill Marchenko? The way that, for example, the Dallas Stars, I think, looking at how the heck they are going to fit Jason Robertson under the cap next season, right? Or the season after next. They're not in that kind of trouble yet. So really it depends on do you bet on your players? Do you bet on the fact that Adam Fantilli is going to turn into a monster? Do you bet that Kirill Marchenko is going to be a potentially top 10 in the league in scoring wingers this season, right? Do you make the bet that Ken Johnson's going to continue to grow? Do you, bet on your own players as opposed to bringing in outside players? And I think that's the good thing, right? Is the Blue Jackets are in a really good place with all of their own players. Yeah, they can't bring in outside help like a Noah Dobson, for example, or a Nikolai Ehlers, but that means that they can save that money for next offseason, the offseason after that, the offseason after that, right? Because yes, the cap is going to keep going up over the next. I think it's going up like $20 million over the next, this offseason next and the offseason after that. So that'll bring you to what, the 27, 28 offseason, I believe, 2028. I think will be when this massive cap jump stops. There's no guarantee that it's going to keep rising after that, right? So the fact that the Blue Jackets right now have a lot of cap flexibility, yes, there are some not ideal contracts there. They're going to be paying Ivan Provorov for a long time. They're going to be paying Damon Severson for a long time, right? But they have They still have freedom to make moves and to do what they want. And it's just really frustrating that they were like, hey, we have all this cap space and we're going to do something about it. And then it turns out that actually, everyone has cap space to do something about it, right? Like, that's why Florida got to re-sign all of their guys. That's why Vegas found a way to sign Mitch Marner, right? Like, every team has cap space at the minute, which is frustrating, but I don't think will last forever. So we'll see. Next offseason, we might be having an identical discussion about, like, wow, the Blue Jackets have $25 million in cap space, and all of the other teams have decided to not do that. So we'll see how it goes. But right now, I'm not concerned that the cap going up is going to keep the Blue Jackets stagnant, just because I think a lot of the in theory, all of the players that are going to be part of this core that's going to keep getting better are either already on the team or already in the system, right? Guys like Caden Lindstrom, Jackson Smith, etc., right? So I wouldn't be surprised if, and this kind of links back to the first question about the offseason efforts this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Blue Jackets kind of stay static, stay where they are this season and then make that jump next season, just because of a bunch of reasons, but mostly because of, things like they didn't get the big free agent that they wanted or that the fans wanted. I don't know that the organization, or I don't know that Don Waddell was ever really going to go out and get a top 6 winger, right? I think he probably made a couple of courtesy calls like, hey, how, does Mitch Marner want to play in Columbus? No? Okay, moving on. Does Nikolai Ehlers want to play in Columbus? No? Okay, moving on, right? You can't force players to play where they don't want to play. Or you shouldn't be able to. I fully believe that. So the short answer to this question is yes, trades and signings will become less available, but I don't know that that's going to be what keeps the Blue Jackets static. I think probably what's going to keep the Blue Jackets static will be if the young players on the team don't continue to take steps forward. And I have no reason to think that that's not going to happen. So I feel frustrated by the cap situation, but also by the league-wide cap situation, I should say, but not by the specific Blue Jackets cap situation. I feel fine about that. That's kind of all for that one. We're going to take another quick break, and then I've got a couple of more fun questions that will not take us long to get into. So we'll do those questions in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're doing a mailbag episode. We've talked about the salary cap and, is this a problem? We talked about the offseason and, we've given them a letter grade. I got a couple of email questions, and what I did was I copied them into my notes app on my laptop and then deleted the emails and did not say who they were from. So if this was you, I'm very sorry to not give you credit, but they were fun questions. So I've pulled them, and again, I am very sorry for not assigning credit. But the first one is obviously we had Dylan Tyre on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him then who his most is there an underrated prospect that we should be looking out for? And this person wanted to know who is my most underrated prospect. Who am I looking at for the Blue Jackets organization that I think is going to be a hidden gem. And I kind of have a couple of answers here. And my first one is maybe a little bit cheating because I don't know that he counts as underrated anymore. But Luca Pinelli is, I think, going to be a guy that makes it sooner rather than later just because he tries so damn hard, right? Luca Pinelli was taken in the 4th round. I had him on my board as a first-round talent, I believe. And again, I know enough about prospects to make me dangerous, so I didn't I didn't have a full ranking. But when I looked at him, I was like, this would be a guy that I would take with the I don't remember what picks the Blue Jackets had in that year, but he was a guy that I would be like, well, I would take him, at the end of the 1st, start of the 2nd. Blue Jackets got him in the 4th round. And he then proceeded to score almost 50 goals in the OHL the following season. Wore the C for the Ottawa 67s. Had 82 points in 68 games. Had kind of a down year this year with, again, the Ottawa 67s. Only 71 points only in 52 games, but he did that as basically the only dude on his team. The 67s were not good this year, and he was basically, I think, the only older player that stayed. I think a bunch of other guys got traded to like playoff teams, and he was like, no, I want to finish out my junior career in Ottawa. So he stuck around, which is I think admirable, quite frankly, considering just how miserable the 67s were. And he still had 71 points in 52 games as, again, the only dude on that team. Had a brief stint with the Cleveland Monsters at the end of the season, had 2 points in 3 regular season games and then 4 points in 6 playoff games for them. I would expect him to put a decent showing in at training camp, but not make the team. I think he's going to be a really, really good Cleveland Monster next season. But Luca Pinelli is, and this is no disrespect to Trey Fix-Wolansky, who obviously, Cleveland Monsters fans are going to miss him, and for good reason. Luca Pinelli is Trey Fix-Wolansky, but with a higher ceiling, and also is a natural center. Trey Fix-Wolansky played center, but was better as a winger. Luca Pinelli is a center that plays center, and I think is just like a dog on a bone, right? Is small, and he's going to make that your problem, right? So I don't know that he counts necessarily as underrated, because I do think I talk about him enough on this show to make him, properly rated. And I think he's climbing up the Blue Jackets kind of prospect rankings as well. I know Dean Everson is really high on him. So that could, again, make it interesting. I'm really excited to see him in some preseason action come kind of late September, early October. But he's definitely a player that I am really, really excited about in terms of there's an NHL player in there, and it's not like if, it's when, right? The other more underrated player, I think, is Guillaume Richard, who is a defenseman that's just come out of 4 years with Providence College. Kind of a quiet, understated guy. Had 4 points in 8 Monsters games at the end of the season, and then 2 points in 6 playoff games for them as well. Is a stay-at-home defenseman that is very he's not flashy, right? He's not, you don't notice him, and that's a good thing, right? And I think he's going to be a guy, again, that I don't know if there is necessarily an NHL player there, but if there is, I think he's going to be, like, he's either going to be a very solid, 500 game NHL player, or he's going to be a lifelong AHL player, right? Like, I don't see him. It's bust or boom sounds mean when if you play 10 years in the AHL, then I don't think you count as a bust, especially as a 4th round pick. But Guillaume Richard, I think there's potential there. There's third pairing upside there at the NHL level, and I think, again, the organization, I think, is quietly quite high on him. I wasn't sure that there was something there until kind of I watched a fair amount of him this most recent season at Providence College. It was senior year at Providence College in the NCAA. He only had 14 points in 37 games, only 2 goals, but the team was better with him on the ice than they were with him off the ice, right? And Providence College is not the NHL, but if he has a good full AHL rookie season this coming year, I could see him kind of quietly making himself into an option as, oh, well, Jake Christensen's injured, for example. Let's call him up and play him in the third pairing, right? Or something along those lines. I don't know that he ever turns into a real difference maker, but I do think that he is a guy that could be an NHL player more likely than not. So we'll see how that goes. The other question I got was just kind of short and sweet, which is, who is your favorite Blue Jacket that no one else remembers? And I had to really think about this because, again, I've been a Blue Jackets fan for about a decade now. Or no, more than a decade. It was about 2014 when I got into the team, and like there's been a lot of like come and go players, right? And so I was like, who is a player that no one else remembers that I liked a lot? And again, I kind of have a couple answers for this, and one of them is kind of cheating because he was here as recently as like 2 seasons ago, which is I still think Nick Blankenberg is an NHL defenseman. And I understand why they moved on from him because he's small and isn't a great skater, and like those are two things that Don Waddell hates is small bad skaters. But I do think that there's an NHL like a top 4 NHL defenseman in there, and he just had great energy. And also he was one of those weird players where like his own stats were kind of replacement level. But everyone else improved around him. Like people were better with him as their defense partner than they were without him, despite the fact that his own stats were kind of replacement level, which is kind of a wild inconsistency. The other player that I'm going to mention is a player that nothing ever happened with him. He ended up going to Chicago as part of the Brandon Saad trade, the first Brandon Saad trade, I believe. He is currently playing in the ELH, which is in the Czech Republic, and that's Marco Dano. He was part of the first Brandon Saad trade back in 2015. He was the 27th overall pick in 2013. I just liked his energy a lot. Like, and again, obviously nothing ever came of him. I think by the time that, he was an AHL player by like 2019. He did come back. He did play with the Monsters in that season. Played, I think, two NHL games maybe, and then went back to Europe about 5 years ago. But he is a player that I don't know. Sometimes you just like imprint on a player, and it's really kind of up in the air about whether they're going to make it or not. But I just was like, there was something there, and he was fun to watch. And I don't know. I still don't know if it was mismanagement or if the player was a poor fit with the organization, or if he just didn't have what it took, or like it was. He was one of those prospects that came during the time where like the Blue Jackets didn't have a lot of first round picks that panned out between like 2010 and 2018, let's say. Maybe all the way up to 2020, depending on who you ask. But Marco Dano. So if you remember Marco Dano as a Blue Jacket, I don't think it was his first NHL goal, but I do distinctly remember him being in the building for a 5-0 win over the Maple Leafs back in 2015. That was my first Blue Jackets game at Nationwide, and he did score a goal in that. So I did feel a little bit vindicated then. But yeah, he's my choice, I think, for Blue Jacket that no one else remembers. He was only here for a minute, but I had fun when he was. So that's that was kind of a fun question for me to be like, man, who is the most obscure Blue Jacket that I can like pull off the dome, right? And that was my answer. I dug a little deeper to see if there's anyone else I was forgetting, but I was like, no, this is the dude we're going to talk about because why not, right? Anyway, shout out to everyone who sent questions in. I appreciate y'all. We will not have an episode tomorrow unless news happens, which I'm not expecting it to. We'll be back on Wednesday. And I think what we'll do on Wednesday, actually, is we'll talk about the state of the AHL team, because that has had a huge amount of upheaval, and I think is going to lose. Like, they've lost a lot of players from their AHL team. They've added some players, but we'll take a look at the state of the Cleveland Monsters and what's going on there. So that's going to be Wednesday's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter. Thank you once again for listening. And until Wednesday, make sure you stay locked on.